It is one of the more disturbing cases we've seen recently, and it involves a female teacher allegedly assaulting nearly 24 students. Now, she's headed to trial after announcing to one student that she was pregnant with his child. Chris Hansen's in studio to help me analyze this stomach-turning situation. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So Law&Crime News has been closely following this case of former Tennessee teacher Alissa McCommon since she was first arrested last September. Now, nearly a year later, she is preparing for multiple trials. The 39-year-old was an elementary school teacher at Charger Academy. It's also known as Covington Integrated Arts Academy in Covington, Tennessee. And McCommon was first arrested on allegations that she raped at least one minor and admitted to communicating inappropriately with a lot of former students. And she was booked into jail, released on a $25,000 bond, and this is when things take a different turn. Because as if it wasn't just insane to be thinking about this first, now McCommon allegedly had contact with the young victim, the person she was expressly forbidden to have contact with. And you know what? She didn't just contact him. She allegedly tells him she was pregnant with his baby. So police, they put her back in cuffs. They hauled her back to the Tipton County Jail. And during a court appearance, prosecutors played parts of a voicemail that McCommon left for the 12-year-old boy.
I will never text you again. You will never hear from me again. Just please don't say anything. I'm under so much stress and I'm so scared. I'll raise this baby and I love this baby. And I'll do it by myself. I tried to tell you when it comes out. I'm looking like you. We don't have to talk anymore. Just please, God, tell me you're not going to say anything. I'll never speak to you again.
So what do you think happened this time? McCommon's bond denied. She's been locked up ever since. And when she appeared in court for that hearing, McCommon did appear to be visibly pregnant. But at her next appearance in July, she looked kind of different. Now, that is 9 months after she first allegedly told the victim about the baby, but her attorneys and investigators have remained kind of silent about the pregnancy, so it's unclear what may have happened. By the way, really appreciate you guys coming to us as we cover this incredibly disturbing case. And so let me just take a minute to talk to you about something that could really help your life. It's our sponsor, Upside. Upside is a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. So when I pump my gas, I can use Upside and get cash back, real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. So once you have the Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. This is at places like Shell, Exxon, 7-Eleven, so many more. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app and you get paid. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code SIDEBAR and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Hope you can check it out. I want to bring in right now, fan favorite here at Sidebar, my favorite, one of my favorites. I can't say my favorite because everybody else will get insulted, but he knows how I feel. Friend of the show, host of Takedown on TruBlue and the podcast Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen's with me. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Jesse.
So, you know, I know why you're here. Another case.
This thing is just an absolute rat's nest down in Tennessee. And we did some reporting on this a while back at TruBlue for a special we did. And it's not just the shocking allegations of this, but take a look at this woman who, at least at the time of these allegations, was married to a local sheriff's deputy. And her lawyer is a former deputy who served with this guy. And these kids apparently came and went from the family residence frequently, and that's where some of these allegations take place. So you have one of the most unlikely suspects you could ever imagine. We cover these stories, you do it here, and we do it at TruBlue all the time. And there seems to be an epidemic of female teachers allegedly sexually involved with students. I've never seen anything like it. We're commissioning a documentary on it. There's so many cases now. It's shocking.
Can I ask you the question I always ask you in terms of, do you think it's happening more now, or do you think it's being reported more? It's just we're seeing it happen more?
Well, I think it's a combination, right?
Yeah.
I think we're very good at reporting as much as kids can be targeted and find themselves in trouble because of the proliferation of social media. It also creates a trail that police and parents can discover.
Right.
So there's more of it and more of it being reported at the very same time, I think.
So talk to me about, generally speaking, when unfortunately you have these situations and her perpetrator becomes pregnant.
Yeah.
And let's say she gets prosecuted, she goes to prison. What generally happens with the baby?
Well, that's a good question. If the father of the child is of age, the court could determine that he could, or possibly his family could, get custody of that child. But you have this enormous responsibility that is thrust upon a child who is sexually assaulted, even if they said, okay, they're not old enough to give legal consent, as you know. They're a victim here. They're a survivor. And now there's this child in the mix. So who takes the child? Does the husband or the family of the woman who gave birth take the child? That seems like a difficult task. Or does the other family? Or does the child go into some sort of foster care, which is tragic in its own way?
And you think about the ripple effects of this. We talk about the harm to not only the victim in the case, but you also think about this young baby, this baby.
Right.
What kind of, it's an interesting way to enter the world.
This is why there is an age of consent in this country. This is why teachers are not supposed to have sexual relations with students. It creates these horrifically difficult situations. And what's causing it? I've had people tell me, and I tend to believe, that we see in real life with offenders what we see in fantasy world on porn sites. So if you see a lot of daddy-daughter situations, as grotesque as that sounds, they exist. If you see teacher-student fantasies being played out on porn sites, you will see a certain amount of this in real life.
That is equally disturbing and disgusting at the same time. Speaking of that, it turns out that she not only allegedly abused him, but it is believed that Miss McCommon may have victimized as many as 21 students ranging in ages from 12 to 17, because in March, McCommon was indicted on 23 charges. And I want to talk about this because it's a really long list. You have rape of a child, 5 counts of aggravated statutory rape, 4 counts of sexual exploitation by electronic means, 4 counts of solicitation of a minor to commit aggravated statutory rape, 2 counts of statutory rape by an authority figure, 2 counts of coercion of a witness, 2 counts of aggravated stalking, violation of the Child Protective Act, tampering with evidence, harassment. And by the way, some of these charges are about her contacting or allegedly contacting the victim after she wasn't supposed to. And the 23 charges, as our understanding, are related to 5 victims, and 13 of those charges are concerning 1 minor victim. So, Chris, I look at this and I say, the prosecutors are going all out. They're covering all their bases.
Well, this is obviously an extreme case. If
Yeah.
the allegations are in fact true, this is a woman who is out of control and is somehow playing out this, sexual fantasy she has, whether it's sexual or a power fantasy she has. And there are multiple cases here. And it's disturbing. And the one side you want to say, okay, this is a woman who's obviously crying out for help. What's going on with her psychiatrically, psychologically? But it's criminal. And each one of these offenses, if true, these allegations, it has a lifelong impact on the victims. And those parents now have to deal with the trauma this has caused. There's this image in society, it's a schoolboy fantasy, go for it, right on you. But these things have a psychiatric cost attached to them.
And I'm glad you say that, because unfortunately that's what you see a lot.
Well, that's what you
like
do.
when you see these stories on social media with people with the comments.
Very attractive young teacher and the underage male student who's maybe bigger and physically more developed than the normal 14, 15-year-old would be, but it's still illegal.
Yeah.
And that's why we have these barriers in society to protect kids from that. We trust our teachers. Imagine the shock in this small community in Tennessee. The teacher who's a trusted figure, the wife of a sheriff's deputy, a lawman, who is friends with another sheriff's deputy who's representing her, at least was at one time, as defense counsel. This is the sort of thing that tears apart a community and tears apart at least 5 to 8 families. And
you talk about the charges, even with respect to her, with respect to that one victim, 13 charges. I don't know exactly what the law is in Tennessee, but generally speaking, if she's convicted of all of them, you could have a situation where the judge actually does consecutive sentences. Sure. And I think the goal here is to make sure she can never be out to harm or allegedly harm anybody ever again. And I want to talk about these allegations. So officials say that McCommon would start by talking to students outside of the classroom, by playing video games with them, and from there, she allegedly switched to social media apps before sending explicit messages and photos. And according to investigators, McCommon would then text the victims a code word so that they could indicate if they were alone or they were not alone before she allegedly sent nude photos of herself via Snapchat. And according to Covington police, they got involved when they learned that McCommon had been suspended without pay from her position by Tipton County Schools due to these allegations. Chris, pattern here, right?
Well, it's grooming.
Escalation.
It's grooming. It's exactly, Jesse, what we see in our predator investigations. Hey, what's going on? How old are you? ASL. 14. Oh, you look so much older. You must be so mature. You don't want to talk to a guy my age. And then incrementally, you see the predator, in this case, the teacher, start to break down the barriers that exist in our society between adults and children. And it's grooming. It's classic grooming. And then you take it to a place where it's harder to detect texting, and you have these code words, and these kids are drawn into it because they think they're part of something special. They think they've been chosen by this older woman who's going to offer them, you know, these sexual fantasies. And it's not fair for an adult to do that to a child.
I was thinking about this the other day that, you know, when you're younger, or even in college, you get this attachment to professors and teachers.
No.
Not sexual, but
No,
you get this
but
attachment, this
there are
authority
healthy
figure.
friendships. Obviously, we all had teachers growing
Yeah.
up who were great people.
Yeah.
And mentors. I had, you know, great positive influences on my life in junior high and high school, and became friends with undergraduate teaching assistants at college who are still friends to this day. I've gone to speak at their funerals. You know, I've known some of these people for 40 years. And that's why this is such a terrible crime.
Right.
To just break that trust and to use grooming in a way that is such a violation of an innocent child is there's a special place in our legal system for somebody like that.
Because there's already that vulnerability there. There's
Well,
already
yeah,
that position of
but that's what
trust.
predators do. Predators pick on the vulnerable.
Yeah.
They're good at finding the vulnerabilities, and they'll work them. And again, is this something that this woman has dealt with for a long time, and we just found out about it a year or so ago? Is this something that happened to her? Is this her reliving a very satisfying time in her life? Or is it all of the above? These things are very rarely a single point failure.
Right.
You know, this is a combination of evil that comes together and ends up victimizing a child.
And sometimes victims become the victims.
Sometimes,
the
yeah.
abusers. So McCommon, she was in court in June as well, requested a public defender be appointed because she has no money. And the court questioned her about finances, including what she might have available in a retirement savings account.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have a guesstimate
Okay.
that after they take away their fees for popping it early, maybe around $10,000, but I honestly don't know. I know that I've tried to call one time, and it's kind of hard to call from the jail phone because they won't accept phone calls from the jail.
And McCommon, by the way, was in the process of apparently separating from her husband, and the prosecution suggested that those proceeds from the sale of their home could go towards her defense. You know, Chris, the state objected. They didn't want taxpayer money being used for her defense, but we do have another situation here where somebody might not have the finances.
Well, yeah, and that's why we have public defenders, obviously, and there's a system in place for that. The question is going to be, and the court will decide this, obviously, that, you know, how much of her proceeds should be used for this defense. If it's going to be split in the divorce, you know, obviously this husband is shell-shocked as well. I mean, here's a law enforcement officer who, like, his wife was supposed to be as a teacher, a servant of the community, and now he's in this situation, and they had kids together.
Can you just amplify that in the sense, it's not like
You talk about a
the cases
betrayal.
in the majority of the cases we cover, it's not like, you know, single loner person. You know, these are people who have boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands,
Right.
wives, kids. They're engaged, and they end up doing this.
Or allegedly married to a pillar of the community.
Yeah.
A respected deputy with the local sheriff's department. Everybody knows this guy. And that's why I think in some of these cases, when you have somebody who is in a prominent position who commits a crime like this, people are hesitant to believe it at first. How could this teacher, married to the sheriff's deputy, commit such an atrocity? It must just be local, you know,
Right.
wise talk and people just jealous or, you know, gossiping. But in this case, if you believe the prosecution's evidence, and it's certainly strong evidence, it's true.
Now, We checked the Tipton County Court website, by the way, and it appears that a private Tennessee attorney is representing McCommon. And if she is convicted, it's our understanding she could face a minimum sentence of 25 years in prison. Now, last fall, Covington Police Chief Donna Turner said that she'd spoken with the U.S. Attorney's Office and intended to, quote, pursue any appropriate federal charges related to the sexual exploitation of these victims, utilizing cell phones, inappropriate relations, and activities across jurisdictional state lines. So possible federal charges.
Well, right. I mean, you're using the internet, obviously. You're using telephones to text. And you know, if there was some activity between her and somebody across state lines, that's a federal crime.
Yeah, I mean, the state charges are serious. Federal,
Right.
you're talking on a whole different level. Now, when it comes to multiple trials, we know that McCommon's case is going to be split in two, because this week the judge granted a motion from the defense to separate these things into two cases, and one trial will focus on the case involving one victim, presumably the student that she says she got her pregnant, and the second trial will include multiple victims. I'm not surprised by that, because I think there could be an issue of prejudice, right? There could be, if you're representing her, you could say, look, there's so many allegations with this one victim. You don't want the jury grouping them all together.
Right.
I'm not surprised by that. It'll be more expensive, more time consuming.
It will be, you're absolutely right.
I'm not
But I
surprised.
also would not be shocked if at some point we see some sort of a plea agreement, which is what we see in a lot of these predator cases. The evidence is overwhelming. You know, do you want to drag the family through this? Do you want the defendant, if you're the lawyer or you're trying to be considerate of the defendant's family,
Right.
to have to hear all these atrocious, sexually explicit details? If I had to bet money, we'll see a plea.
Well, I want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And that's the fact that this case, and many of you are probably listening to this and saying, why does this seem so similar to something else that I heard back in the day? Mary Kay Lerno. This is the case from the 90s. Now, if you don't know this case, it's a wild one, 1997. 34-year-old Mary Kay Lerno pled guilty to second-degree rape of a child for sexually abusing a 12-year-old. He was a sixth grader at an elementary school in Washington. And the teacher claims she didn't know that having sex with a minor was illegal. And similar to the McCommon case, Lerno was pregnant and gave birth to a baby prior to sentencing. She reached a plea agreement where she would spend 6 months in jail with 3 months suspended, but she wasn't allowed to contact the victim. But after she got out, she was caught in a car with him. So she was sent back to prison to serve 7.5 years, the maximum under the law. And while in prison, she gives birth to the victim's second child. And once released from prison in 2004, Lerno and this former student got married, spent 14 years together before they separated in 2019. And Lerno died in 2020 from colon cancer. You see similarities here?
Well, I do see similarities. You've got the teacher-student, and you know, people ask all the time why we don't see female predators in our stings. And the reason that is given to us by therapists and experts in this field is that female predators typically don't like the anonymity. They like to know their victim, and that fits in with the teacher-student scenario. So yeah, there's a big similarity here. In the Mary Kay Lerno case, I think she and her defense counsel would argue that, you know, in spite of the obvious illegality there was a love, there was a relationship, and in fact they stayed together. Doesn't mitigate any of the laws broken here,
Right.
and the crimes committed. But, you know, this was a one-time situation. In this case, you've got multiple victims, multiple allegations, and multiple criminal charges.
Yep, that's an important point. And a motions hearing is set for next week. Trial scheduled for, I believe, January. But as you know, sometimes these dates are never set in stone. Things can change. And as Chris said, we might see an ultimate plea deal in this case. Chris Hansen, great to see you.
Jesse Weber, thank you.
TruBlue.
Watch TruBlue.com.
TruBlue.com, and also Predators I've Caught. Chris
Exactly.
Hansen. Good seeing you, sir.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Anytime.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.